Good morning, folks. It's about 4:45 a.m. in the morning. It's a usual time for someone like me to get up and just contemplate life a little bit. Normally between 2 a.m. and probably 5 a.m. is probably a time since I've received a cancer verdict that I've been awake the most and contemplating life. There's a couple of things I want to say that I've learned, and I'm learning a lot. It's been about now 5-6 weeks since I've had a cancer verdict, and I've been through a lot in 6 weeks. It's a short amount of time, but it's a long amount of time in any cancer verdict, because you go through an incredible amount of change. Your whole mindset changes. Your whole reality changes. Everything you thought to be true, everything you thought to be constant, changes. And so you have to go to a paramount shift in your mind to be able to reevaluate life and what does it all mean, this new verdict of cancer. So I'm hoping that maybe I can give you a little snapshot into the mind of someone who has a verdict, into the mind of some of the feedback I've received from others who have verdict on cancer, because there's so many different types. At the end of the day, the word cancer means a great deal to many. It means different things to different people. So let's have a look at that, shall we? And see what that means to us. So my first thoughts of cancer is something that I remember very distinctly with my pop. I called him my pop. He was my second grandfather. My first grandfather died when I was only 2 years of age. I didn't really know him. But my second grandfather, his name was Len. And I remember that he received a diagnosis of cancer, and at the time I was a young man in Queensland, and I immediately jumped in the car and I drove 1,000 kilometres down to the place where he was, where I grew up. And I remember his last words to me, and his last words to me was how insidious this disease was, and how horrible it was, and how he could not escape it. And that's all I remember. He passed away not long after that. He went into a coma and never came out. And so that was my take on cancer at that time as a young man. And then I guess cancer became something that was highly publicized. You would see it, Glenn McGrath's Pink Day. You would see Yellow Day. You'd have all these colours associated with cancer, predominantly pink or yellow for fundraising. And you'd see it on TV. It really, you knew it was something terrible, and always empathetic to cancer. Always, if you had a chance to give something to the research of cancer, yes you would. Or participate, yes you would. Everyone kind of knows someone, but still the reality is a distant reality. And cancer, there's so many forms of cancer. I mean, geez, from breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, bowel cancer, thyroid cancer. I've had a little bit scare myself with a thyroid. I had to have some radiation therapy, in that I had a iodine capsule to remove and kill off part of my thyroid. So it was because of a possible cancer within the thyroid, and my sister has been through that as well. There's brain cancer, there's the AAL cancer, which is leukemia, cancer of the blood, cancer of the bone. There's so many different forms of cancer. Everyone's different. The way it affects the body, everything is different. So cancer is quite a large perspective of different types of diseases that you can be having. It's not just one. It's just not one cancer. There's so many different types, and so much research into each one of these. So it's not an isolated thing. You can't solve cancer here or solve cancer there. It's a big thing. It's interesting to look at from someone who has cancer in different forms. And as I went through hospital and started some of my chemotherapy and in the first cycle and into the second cycle, I actually got to meet some people that have cancer in different ways and listen to them. And that was an education, really was. In hospital, in the cancer wards, I got to see some real survivors. People that have been in the battle of cancer. And I always didn't understand this, you would hear this person has been in a battle with cancer or lost their battle with cancer or so on. But there's been real battles with cancer, because it really is a bit of a battle sometimes. But I met people that have been fighting cancer for, and I'm not sure fighting's the word, maybe surviving or enduring cancer is probably the word. And they have been enduring the experience of cancer for 10 years, 8 years, 10 years. And I never forget some of the things that they said to me. And that's what I want to say to you, as maybe if you haven't had the reality of cancer, I'm sure a lot of people have, loved ones. They've watched loved ones go through cancer, and it's a tough gig. But some nice things that they say maybe is a good tip to bring your attention to. So there was this one chap that he'd obviously had a pretty rough time with cancer, tumours throughout his body, and you could see visibly his war wounds, loss of eye, 10 years, living with cancer, and really living but chasing life, because cancer is a life sentence, it's not a death sentence. And people don't realise that. Sure, without the diagnosis, maybe it was a death sentence. But normally the diagnosis is actually giving you a life sentence. It's giving you an opportunity of life. For instance, when I was given a diagnosis, they could not see the healthy cells through the cancer cells that were in my blood. Prior to given the diagnosis, I had a death sentence. I had 1 to 2 weeks. I would have just dropped off, maybe fallen unconscious, maybe slipped off my office chair from work, and that's over, the death sentence. But they found the cancer. And so now I have a life sentence. I have an opportunity of life, and that is incredibly wonderful. It really is. It's an opportunity to live longer, to have an impact in this world. Why I'm breathing, why there's air going through my lungs, why there's thoughts going through my mind, why there's life. With life there's hope. One of the things that I sat down with 2 cancer patients in the cancer ward, one had cancer and tumours throughout the body, but one had tumours throughout the brain, and had been in the battle for 8 years, on I think the 8th surgery through the brain. One of the things that they shared with me, of which I really resonated, was that a lot of people come to them and they tell them, by some way of maybe therapeutic counselling in the best intentions at all, but they tell them of the stories that aren't the success stories. Oh, my mate had cancer, he had a battle for 5 years and, then he died. Or, I had a good friend had cancer, and, it was a terrible thing and they died, and, always stories of death. And look, the reality is that this is an insensitive disease. There are so many types, and people do pass away. Often also they're diagnosed late, or it's a serious thing. It's not a thing to be chilled with. But what motivates someone with cancer is stories of hope, is stories of life. I had a friend. They went through cancer, but you know what? They lived. They're still living. They had a great another 10 years. They're still alive and living, and they're fully in remission. The life is flowing through their blood, and they can continue on in this world. They're great things to know. And let me give you an example. So, the cancer counsellor reached out to me and asked if I wanted a support person. And a support person is someone that you can have a chat with. They're going through a similar thing to you. Maybe they have a similar diagnosis, and they're really going through something that resonates with you because it's all new. You're being diagnosed. What does it mean? What's it going to impact? Or what's it mean 1 month down the line? What does it mean 2 months down the line? What's the treatments going to look like, etc. So they reached out to see if they could find me a support person. And normally they try to match you with someone who has a very similar diagnosis. For me, I have a rare diagnosis. So the type of cancer I have is AAL, which is Acute Lymphoblastic Leukaemia. And it's got a rare mutation called Philadelphia Positive. It's a rare chromosome change. Unfortunately, this is a disease that's normally associated with children. They get it, but they have normally good survival rates for it. But still, insensitive, not nice. In adults, it's much more dire than that. And up until in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of medical science, but 10 years ago, it was a pretty dark sort of diagnosis. So I wanted to understand exactly what this was. I really wanted to have a support person. Someone who's been through it. Here, someone who's survived it. Anyway, I had to do the normal things because life goes on. You're going through cancer, but life goes on. You have to do those normal things, day-to-day things that tidy up your life. You're doing things like checking your super. You're doing things like watching your out for your family, doing your wills, tidying up your bills, all that sort of things that you really need to do. And one of those things was as simple as I had to get the car serviced. My wife works full-time. My car's got to be serviced, and she's not going to get the opportunity to take it into the place to get it serviced. It was due at service, and it's a warranty thing, and that car's going to be pretty crucial to us in the future as we downsize from 2 cars to 1 car, just because that's the reality of this. You need to find what's important. And so I went in for service, which involved me taking the car in, sitting in a service centre for a while. While I was in that service centre, I got a call back from the Cancer Council to say, unfortunately, they'd searched around Australia and couldn't find a support person for me. A bit of a blow, in that they couldn't find someone with a similar diagnosis as me. And that's a shame. I really wanted that. But funny enough, and this is the way life works sometimes, the chap that was taking the service, so the service centre manager, he happened to understand that I had leukemia, and this particular type of leukemia, because I had disclosed this in order to be one of the first to be serviced and to be through the service centre very quickly, so I wouldn't be exposed to a lot of coughs, colds and things like that, just some of those things that now become important things. And he said to me, it's funny because his daughter was recently diagnosed, that is in the last 7 months, diagnosed with the same disease that I had. She was diagnosed by a random test. She was pregnant, and quite incredibly, has been through already the whole procedure which is going before me, which is the leukemia, cycles of leukemia, cycles of chemotherapy, down to the transplant, so the bone marrow transplant. So in my case, there has to be a bone marrow transplant where they have to basically kill off my bone marrow, and I have to get a donor bone marrow. So what he was able to tell me very quickly is that there was a success story, that she had received an international donor, I think from Sweden, and that person had been a 12 out of 12 match, and had the transplant as well as all the chemo, and the whole cancer had gone into remission, and she's got a chance now in remission to live a normal life. A success story. And let me tell you, just hearing that little story, what it did for my spirit and lifted me, because up till that, all I'd read online is a death sentence. All I'd read online is the negatives and the statistics. But here I was listening to someone who was talking about a survivor that was living. That's the wonderful thing. And they're the types of things that someone who's going through cancer really wants to hear. They don't want to necessarily hear all the stories, because there's thousands. We all know thousands of stories out there. But sometimes they want to hear the stories of life, of living, of success. So just bear that in mind when you're talking with someone. It's sure, empathy. It gives you great empathy to know someone who's been through a cancer story, or understanding the effects of cancer. And we all have those grief stories, I guess, sad stories that you will walked with someone through those lines. By someone who's in the midst of it, give them hope. Give them stories of life. Because, like me, sitting in front of you, I'm alive. There is air through my lungs. There is such thought in my head. And for me, life is not over. There is so much left for me. There is so much left to achieve. I have so many thoughts of benefiting the people just around me. And I have so many thoughts of what is my mission and passion. How can I do something great for other people? Or maybe people like me. Or maybe people like you. That's what a cancer is. It's a life sentence. It's not a death sentence. Remember that.